What's going on, everybody? It is the OnFriar podcast. I'm Derek Togerson. That is not Darnay Tripp. Darnay's taking some well-deserved time off. Kyle Glaser, national MLB writer, jumping in for us today. Kyle, thanks for doing this, man. How you doing?
Doing all right, Derek. Glad to be back on with you.
Always glad to have you on here. First, we have to do the ubiquitous walk-up music. Let's get that out of the way right now. All right. Of course, OG sponsors the OnFriar podcast. Thank you to them for all that they do for us. Just go check out their food and their beer and watch a bunch of sporting events. And that's really all I need to know about it. It's a great place to go and hang out with the friends. And they have all the good specials. I know we have a whole long list of stuff, but the bottom line is good food, good fun, good drink, good people. All right. First off, Kyle, you were over at Petco Park last weekend when the Toronto Blue Jays were in town. So you got a really nice, fresh look at this club. First off, Starter, give me the 30,000-foot view. And yes, I know anybody who's watching on YouTube, I know the Padres are playing right now. They lead the Rockies in the top of the eighth, 8-4. But when you got someone like Kyle, you got to work it into the schedule here. So we'll keep you posted on that game as it's going. Looks like we're going to be able to get another win and win the series. But give me your 30,000-foot view. How do the Padres look right now, 25 games in the season? Maybe not even compared to last year, but just starting fresh. What are we looking at? What is this team doing well? What is it not doing well? What are your impressions?
I think the number one thing that stands out is the quality of at-bats this team is having. We saw last year and sometimes in previous years, especially late and close situations, guys would start trying to play hero ball, swinging for the fences, when all you really needed to do was move a runner over, keep the line moving. And this year, we've seen the team do a much better job of chipping away one run at a time. I think there's just been more mature at-bats. And the other thing that really jumped out to me was being in the clubhouse. I covered the Padres during their series in LA and then was down in San Diego for a few days. So there's definitely a different vibe in the clubhouse this year. I think last year you could feel a lot of the frustration, a lot of the tension, a lot of the irritation. Here, I don't know, everyone just seems to be playing a little more loose, a little more free. There's a little bit more maturity just in the conversations they're having, the words they're using. I think back to, Jerks and Profar, the not relevant comment by Will Smith. What really stood out to me is how the Padres responded, manager all the way down to players. It was, hey, Will Smith's a great player. He's entitled to his opinion. We know what Jerks and Profar does for us, and he showed it that night. He had the go-ahead bases clearing double. Again, just a very mature response. So I think there's a lot of things to like about this Padres team so far. Again, very, very early in the season. It's April 25th, and they are playing their 26th game out of 162. A lot can and will change over the course of the summer, but so far it's been encouraging.
Which is interesting. I've noticed the maturity as well. It seems like a more even keel, yet also more fun and energetic clubhouse, which is interesting because they got younger this year. I mean, gone is the veteran Blake Snell. Gone is the veteran Juan Soto. Gone is the veteran Josh Hader. They bring in these young guys, the Michael Kings of the world and the Jackson Merrills of the world and the Graham Paulies of the world. How do you get younger and somehow get more mature? Unless we're talking about like, did the departed guys, were they a problem in the clubhouse last year? Or do they have just a better mix of people here now?
No, I mean, Juan Soto, Blake Snell, and Josh Hader were definitely not clubhouse problems, not by any stretch of the imagination. Look, I think it's a combination of things, right? It's never one thing. I think some of the remaining veterans probably realized that the way things were going last year, where they were on the emotional roller coaster too much, Manny Machado included, didn't work, wasn't good for anyone. I think he definitely has jumped out to me as being a little more even-keeled this year, which is what you needed from your undisputed clubhouse leader. And then anytime you have that injection of youth, it just adds a new element. I think it kind of rubs off on everyone. We see it really throughout the league year after year after year after year. And someone like Jackson Merrill, who comes up, and yes, he's 20 years old, just turned 21, but he handles himself like a veteran. He has mature at-bats. He plays mature defense on center field. Just the way he deals with media, the way he carries himself. He adds that energy, but he does so in a mature, composed way. That's going to rub off on everyone. So I think it's just a different dynamic and some, new faces, new voices in the clubhouse. Again, no one who left was a problem, not by any means. And I'm not saying that just to be nice. There are definitely some guys in the past who were very clearly problems in the Padres clubhouse. I think back to the 2015 team. But I think this is just different dynamic, different year. players still remaining have matured a little bit after the disappointment of last year. And we're seeing the early results here, and so far, so good.
How much of that is Mike Shilton and the leadership he's providing for this club?
Again, I will say this. Look, Bob Melvin's a great manager, and I think it's important to remember he did lead the team to winning records each of his 2 seasons at the helm, which is something pretty much no other Padres manager in recent history can say, consecutive winning seasons.
Bruce Bochy in 05 and 06 was the last time.
Yes, and they reached the NLCS only for the 3rd time in franchise history. So let's not make it seem like the Bob Melvin managerial experiment was a disaster or it didn't work. Just last year, again, there were a lot of frustrations. He got an opportunity to go coach his hometown club, and he took it. So Bob Melvin wasn't a problem by any stretch, but I think Mike Shildt, when the Padres were in that situation, he was the best man for the job. He had been a successful manager recently. He knew how to handle star personalities in St. Louis with Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. He knew how to handle a fan base that was very demanding with the Cardinals. And overall, he just has the credibility. He's a baseball lifer. He worked his way up from Johnson City in the Appalachian League in rookie ball. He's a great teacher of the game. He's seen it all. And really he was the best fit for the job. He knew the organization, having coached in it. And I think it was just this really smart hire by the Padres, given the circumstances they were in. So I'm not surprised that there's been a good start under Mike Shildt. He's a good manager who has tons of credibility. And I think we're just going to continue to see this team continue to play well as long as they stay healthy. If things go sideways this year, it's not going to be because of a manager issue.
You bring up something interesting here. I want to bring up some numbers that I looked up with Mike Shildt. And you're talking about that's not the right one, where this team is going to be going at some point this year, because he is really, really good. Of course, I deleted it because I'm a dummy. But his teams are always better off later in the season. Remember in 2021, they had a 17 franchise record for the Cardinals, 17-game winning streak in September. The year before that, they had a 20-5 record bridging August and September. The year before that, the COVID year, remember they had to play 29 games in 22 days, and he somehow went 16-13 during that time. He goes, I think it was 22-5 or something like that after he takes over halfway through the season from Mike Matheny. His teams always get better as the seasons go on. So how is it that a skipper, no matter what, every single time he's done this, he gets the team to maybe like 500 the All-Star break and then go on some crazy run and make the playoffs with 91 wins? Is that something that's organizational? Is that something that's just the way the manager does it? As something that eventually he tells his guys, I'm going to Jedi mind trick you all and you're all better baseball players now, and we're going to all go together? Do they hit a switch? What happens that it's like clockwork? You get to August and Mike Shilt's teams get better.
It's an understanding that baseball is a long season, and understanding that sometimes you need to keep some guys rested earlier in the year so that when it becomes crunch time during the pennant chase, they're performing at their best. A lot of times these Cardinals teams, you talk about the success they've had, a lot of times they look a little fresher than their opponents. And a big part of that is just, again, Mike Shildt knowing when to kind of give guys a break early in the season. Yes, maybe on the May 18th game, he doesn't use his best reliever and maybe it doesn't work out the way you hope. But guess what? Come August, when a lot of other teams are gassed, and we've seen this Padres team do this a lot, where you get to the end of the season, they're down a few starting pitchers, their bullpen is collapsing under the weight of the workload. Some of their position players look a little bit gassed. The Cardinals in general, and again, it's not just Mike Shildt, it's an organization-wide thing. I want to be clear about that. They always did a really good job of that, and they also always had really good depth. The Cardinals, as much as any organization other than maybe the Dodgers, has done the best job of being able to reinforce players when guys get hurt, when guys get traded, when guys leave as free agents. They've always had to see guys who come up and fill the gap. Now, they haven't the last 2 years, but during Mike Shilt's reign, they absolutely did, and they did that for the better part of 20 years. So it's a combination of the manager, it's a combination of the organization, but it's a good track record, and it is a testament to his ability to get the most from his teams when it counts the most.
And what happened in 2022 when the Padres went to the NLCS? For a lot of that year, they used a 6-man rotation. And to a man, they all said by the end of the year, their starters were fresher. They were going deeper into games. That was a massive, feather in their cap until the NLCS. And what happened? Clevenger wasn't right. And they couldn't find that last starting pitcher because injuries finally caught up to him. This year, injured starter, Yu Darvish goes down. They go to Coors Field with 4 guys who have never started a game at Coors Field. And it's now 9-4 in the 8th inning, looking like they're going to win 3 out of those 4. We know how good Dylan Cease is, but were you even maybe a little bit surprised to see a guy going in there with little to no Coors Field experience to be that good his first trip through. And it's not a great offense that the Rockies have, but man, to not walk anybody at Coors Field over 7 innings, that's damn impressive.
It's incredibly impressive. Anytime you go into Coors Field and pitch 7 innings with a 1 run allowed, that's hugely impressive no matter who the Rockies offense is, just because balls fly there. We saw him make some adjustments throughout the game. Look, Dylan Cease is a consummate professional, and I talked about this in a few different places. This guy was the runner-up in Cy Young Award voting in the American League 2 years ago. Last year he was playing in front of just a dysfunctional team. He had no defense behind him. He was playing in a hitter-friendly park, and he still put up respectable numbers. Now you get him into a situation where, look, he knows how to handle adversity. If you can pitch in front of the White Sox defense the last couple of years, you can accomplish pretty much anything. He's been durable. He's been successful pretty much most of his professional career now. This is a good pitcher who knows what he's doing, knows what adjustments to make, and ultimately can front a rotation, which, again, that's why when the Padres made this trade, immediately in my mind, they went from a team that was probably going to finish on the outside of the wild card race looking in to now a team that had a chance to contend for that last wild card spot. That's how big of a difference Dylan Cease makes. Not just his talent, but his durability, his ability to make adjustments. It's his smarts as much as just his raw talent.
Yeah, by the way, the White Sox, 3-22, they've lost 7 straight games.
It's ugly.
It's so bad in Chicago. But let's talk about that depth. Randy Vasquez has come up in place of Yu Darvish. He was the last guy that we thought, okay, he's shown something when he was with the Yankees. He's looked decent his first couple starts with the Padres. Not overpowering, but certainly a guy who can give you 4 or 5 starts, and you're going to have a chance to win a ball game while Darvish is out. Behind that, are we talking Robbie Snelling as the next man on deck? Like what else do they have in the system that you're going to have to get another start from somewhere? Who's next after Vasquez, hoping that Yu comes back and nobody else has to miss substantial time?
I think you're a little higher on Randy Vasquez than I am, and a little more charitable. I would say his last 2 starts were not particularly good. Look, Robbie Snelling is a very, very talented pitcher. He's a very mature pitcher as well. It wouldn't shock me if we see him available sometime after the All-Star break, potentially earlier if injuries hit. I think that would be a little soon to bring him up. But, the thing with Robbie Snelling is none of his pitches individually are going to make you say, wow. It's not like he throws 99 or has a disgusting curveball, but he knows how to pitch. He works inside and out, both sides of the plate. He's got 3 pitches that are all more than fine. They're all above average. He can control the strike zone. He's just a really good, solid pitcher who's very mature for his age, and he's physical. He's got some durability there. There's no question he can potentially help. One guy to keep an eye on is Adam Mazur. Mazur is having an exceptional start to the season. And, he's someone that just, in my opinion, has always been a little bit underrated, a little bit under the radar. It's real stuff. There have been some concerns at times as their start relief risk, but he's proving over and over and over again he can start. He's got the stuff to do it. He's got the control to do it. He keeps the ball on the ground. He can miss bats. I really think there's a chance we see Adam Mazur sometime this year, and it wouldn't shock me if he comes up and is able to give the Padres a little bit of a boost later in the season.
Adam, and our friend John Connor, the Matt Friars, also, he's very high on Adam Mazur. Yeah. And I've watched one of his starts on the MILB app. How about this year? 3 starts, 16 innings, 16 strikeouts, 0.56 earned run average. And that's in the Texas League. That's if he was doing that in the Pacific Coast League, I say bring him up right now, because obviously he's like the second coming of any, because nobody has those numbers in the PCL. But that's really good competition there in the Texas League. And we've seen guys come up before. Jackson Wolf came up and made a start. He was okay. Alec Jacob came up out of the bullpen and looked like he was pretty good before, elbow issues knocked off his rookie year. Guys can make the jump now from AA to the major leagues. And he was a 2nd-round pick 2 years ago. Yeah. So how are the Padres doing a really good job of finding guys in that 8 to 13, 14 round range who are ready to come in. They're college guys that come in and they're ready to go fairly quick. Graham Paul is one of those kind of guys. How are they finding these types of dudes in the draft that almost to him at Jacob Marcy, even though he was off to a bad start, he looks like he's going to be a future foundational piece right in that mid-round range. What are they doing to find all these guys where so many other ball clubs can't seem to do it?
I will correct you. I wouldn't call Marcy a foundational piece. He's a nice bench outfielder, which again, if you get a major leaguer of any stripe in those mid to late rounds, that's a win. I think the biggest thing with the Potters is they just have good scouts and they trust them. It seems like a simple thing, but in this day and age, we've seen so many teams go way too heavy to the analytics side. And a lot of teams are picking guys. Once you get past the first 5, 6, 7 rounds, even, they're just picking them off their computer. They're not really looking at scouting reports. Sometimes they're not even sending scouts out to see these guys. The Padres have a very, very, very highly qualified and very, very, very talented scouting department. They have a full freight of scouts and they listen to them. That's the biggest thing with AJ Preller and his group. Again, whatever criticisms you might have of AJ Preller, some of which are very valid, he values his scouts. He appreciates their input. He talks through players with them. And ultimately, when it comes time to make a pick, that's where you see a lot of these great players coming from. It's the scout knowing them. It's the scout seeing them with their eyes and saying, look, I know he's at a small mid-major. I know he's a cold weather guy, or I know he's a D2, D3 guy, but there's something here that works and the makeup is there, and those guys can overperform their draft spots a lot of times. If there's a carrying tool, just one thing they do well, you have good makeup, you can build off of that, great work ethic, get them with the right coaches, good things can happen. So this is a function of the Padres having a really, really, really good and really, really, really high qualified, and most importantly, a really, really, really valued scouting department. Again, everything I'm saying is unfortunately becoming increasingly rare in Major League Baseball. And really, you talk about finding the marginal advantages. This is one a lot of teams are missing. The Padres are taking advantage of. The new marginal advantage is having more scouts. You're going to uncover more players because every other team is looking at the exact same data and coming to the exact same conclusions and missing out on some outliers.
So that's Moneyball. Moneyball is not about drawing walks or whatever people thought. It's about finding the inequities in the system and exploiting those inequities. Is this kind of the modern day version of that, where it's, teams aren't scouting guys as well as they should have. We're going to go and scout the hell out of them. We're going to find, diamonds in the rough, pun intended, that other teams are not finding.
Again, I think Moneyball did have a very heavy technological component. And if you go back and read the original text, there was a dismissiveness of scouts that always bothered me and never sat well with me, especially if you consider those Oakland A's teams. The foundations were actually built with great scouting finds and hitting on top draft picks. Barry Zito, Mark Mulder, Eric Chavez, these were high
Tim
draft.
Hudson, yeah.
And then, Tim Hudson again, Jason Giambi, Miguel Tejada were in the system before Billy Beane got there. So it's funny, those A's teams were actually built with great scouting, and Billy Beane did a great job of marketing himself as a genius through the Moneyball publication. Look, it's not so much it's a secret as much as that's how you build good teams. You have to have good scouting. And a lot of owners have decided they'd rather be cheap and hire an analyst who just sits in the office. They don't have to pay for flights and hotels and mileage, but you're going to miss out on good players. We've seen the difference in the Marlins already, just year over year. Last year, they have Kim Ng. They have a good scouting group. She's a very, very widely respected person in baseball who has a great eye for talent. And her team with really good scouts are able to acquire players and get the Marlins, one of the most hapless franchises in baseball, to the postseason over 162 games. Then the owner decides, this was too expensive. I want to do things the Rays way and have a bunch of front office analyst types. Well, fire Kim Ng, bring in a bunch of those analyst types, and they're a terrible team. And the thing people miss about the Rays is the Rays also actually have one of the largest scouting departments in baseball. People think about them as this analytical organization. They have a boatload of scouts who they trust, and they use their input in their decision-making. So this is all a long way of saying the teams who understand the value of scouts are going to finish ahead of the teams who don't. There are a few teams who do. The Padres are one of them. Now, it's not the only part of the equation. They also need to do a better job with Major League roster construction and trade decisions. That's really come back to bite them in recent years. But in terms of acquiring talent at the amateur levels, the Padres have been one of the best teams in baseball. It's just a lot of times the guys they've drafted end up playing for other organizations because they get traded.
Yeah, Jack Sawinski is one of those guys. And we're talking to AJ Preller about him at spring training one year. He's like, this is a 9th round kid out of high school. We'd throw some money at him, put him in the system. And the whole thing was, I liked his swing path. I liked the way he moved around the diamond. And AJ talks a lot about that, the way they move on the diamond. I think that ties in a lot to what you're saying with scouts is you can look at numbers. You can look at, just straight up go to the newspaper and find out who leads the CIF and runs batted in or whatever you want to. But when you go and you look at a guy and you go, you know what? maybe the numbers aren't, the measurables aren't there, but I like the way he just gets a jump on the ball in center field. I like the look of this kid in a uniform. Is that something that's still a thing? Is that something you can still go, you know what? I don't know what it is, but I'm a baseball guy and I like what I see out of this kid, even if though the numbers might not match up to what you think you see there.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And some organizations more than others, you take the shot, you take the flyer. Again, it's a balance, right? You don't want to take the kid who looks like an Adonis but can't hit a mediocre fastball. There are still teams who do that, and it's not a good thing. But you also don't want to say, oh, here's this left-handed hitting outfielder who moves really well and has a nice swing path, but he's not posting great exit velocities. Well, he's in high school. Of course not. You want to get this guy stronger. I mean, there's a balance. And I think that to be clear, the Padres do have an analytics department. They do look at some things, from that lens, and it has led them to some successes. One of the things that really they deserve a lot of credit for on that front, you go back to that offseason where they acquired Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, and Joe Musgrove. Yu Darvish and Blake Snell were very scout-driven acquisitions. Joe Musgrove, that one was being driven really hard by the more analytic side of the team. And they all worked. And that's the thing. It's about the organizations who understand that both can work together and in conjunction. Those are the ones that are going to really, really, really flourish. The Padres at times have not done a great job of being balanced on that front. But for the most part, again, you look at the track record, and we did this during my time at Baseball America. We looked at all 30 major league teams, both in terms of number of big leaguers drafted by the club and the career wins above replacement by big leaguers of those draftees. The Padres were in the top third of Major League Baseball in the A.J. Preller era. The issue has not been finding talent at the amateur levels. It's sometimes been trading away the wrong guys in trade deadline moves.
Emmanuel Clase. Yeah, that's a guy who they sent away way too early. People forget he was even in at one point in the system. But let's talk about Joe, because you look at those three guys, and Snell is stuff galore. And Yu Darvish is so crafty and throws, great stuff. Those 27 different pitches, whatever it is. And then there's Joe, doesn't have overwhelming velocity, spins it really well. Yeah. Places it really well, but he's not a guy you look at and just go, oh man, his stuff is just off the charts. He just beats you with straight up moxie. So it's interesting to hear that is a analytical decision. Whereas the other two guys, Snell and Darvish, they passed the eye test just like that. Yeah. So are they looking at Joe and going, okay, if we put him in this ballpark and have him throw maybe the curveball a little bit more or change this on the slider, we can turn him into an all-star that he's become?
Yeah, it's the idea of get him into a new ballpark, put him in from a better defense, maybe adjust the pitch usage, maybe change the shape on something here or there. There's always little tweaks that people will see, and that was one of the things with him. Again, you talk about functional organizations with Dylan Cease. At the time, the Pirates were a dysfunctional organization. They've been a dysfunctional organization for a really long time now, and there's a long history of guys leaving the Pirates and getting better, from Garrett Cole, Tyler Glasnow, to a degree, Josh Bell, Austin Meadows before he got hurt. So again, I think that one's kind of slim pickings, where you say, hey, if there's a guy on the Pirates who looks the part, has good stuff, maybe if we just get him into a better situation, coaching wise, ballpark wise, defense wise, and make a few tweaks there to some pitch usage or some shapes, good things can happen, especially when he's a hometown guy. And this is where, again, knowing the pitcher and understanding who he is as a person, this is where the scouting component comes into it. Understanding, he's built right, he's got the makeup. Let's make the move. Let's make it happen.
How much better could Andrew McCutchen's career have been then? Even as great as it was, if he hadn't been in Pittsburgh.
Well, he came up through Pittsburgh at the time. The very brief moment where they were a functional organization, that 2013 to 15 range, when they made the playoffs 3 years in a row with McCutchen, Starling Marte. So there was a brief window there, and he's had a great career. MVP, 300 career homers. He's one of the few Pirates successes.
And he's a great dude too. He really, that's one of those guys at Japs you just root for,
1,000%.
On this offense, we talked about Jackson Murrow. You were on on the D Smith show with me this week when I was filling in for Darren, and we talked about Jackson Murrow and just what this kid has meant. You kind of touched on it just a second ago on the youthful influx of energy, because you got these veteran guys. It's Manny and it's Toddy and it's Xander and it's you and it's Joe. Like, these guys are established. They've got their way of doing things. And then this 21-year-old kid comes in, and it's almost like he shopped this energy through the entire clubhouse. And Jurickson Profar, I think, gets a lot of help for that as well, or credit for that as well. So why is it that a kid can come in and be so young and so inexperienced and maybe set a bit of a tone in the clubhouse for these established, very successful guys?
Again, to use a cliche, it's just a little bit of a shot in the arm. And we see it throughout baseball. I mean, when the Braves brought up Ronald Acuna and co a few years ago in 2018, I remember doing a cover story for Baseball America about that. And even Freddie Freeman, this decorated vet at the time at that point was like, yeah, having these guys, just the energy is infectious. And, that's where interpersonal dynamics come in. Sometimes it might not make sense logically, but you feel it, you see it, and it just kind of, becomes part of the team's identity. So, I think with Jackson Merrill, anytime you have a young kid come up and show the energy he has and show the willingness to do the little things he has and show the competitiveness he has, again, he's one of those guys that if he goes 4 for 4 in a loss, he's ticked off. And if he goes 0 for 4 in a win, he's happy. He's very much a team first guy. All that just, can't help but rub off on guys. So I think that anytime you can add someone in the clubhouse, and the Padres talked about this early on, that his makeup was top tier. And I saw it a little bit when he was in Lake Elsinore, not necessarily in what he was saying, but in the way he was growing as a player. When you talk about low class A players, you see a lot of guys who are big and flashy and toolsy, but fundamentally just have a long, long, long way to go. And Jackson Merrill was the rare kid at the time who the footwork at shortstop was really fundamentally sound. The first step off the bat was really, really, really quick. He hung in, left on left, kept that front shoulder closed, facing 22, 23-year-old lefties, driving the ball the opposite way. He was playing a very fundamentally sound, mature game. And this from a kid who was from Maryland, not one of the big, showcase states, was not a big showcase guy. And people forget Jackson Merrill was kind of a surprise back of the first rounder. He was considered, fringe first round, maybe second round, was not a big name by any means. When the Padres took him, it was a little bit of a surprise. And James Wood, their second round pick, got more money. I mean, it was not like this was oh, wow, the Padres, just got the steal of the draft here. It was like, interesting pick. Okay. And then he came out and you just saw that maturity, that makeup really helped elevate him. And then once he started to blossom physically, it was very clear that there was something special here.
Yeah, he puts the work in. Now, again, John Conniff, our friend, said when he got hurt, he hurt upper body injury. I think it was a wrist. And he goes out and he starts working on his lower body. He starts working on his quickness, working on his lateral mobility. It's when you got a guy who's going to find a way to work, you're going to get a guy who's going to find a way to beat you any chance he has a chance to take the field. And that kind of mentality, I think it's kind of gone away a lot in Major League Baseball. And we talked about this last year on this podcast with the Padres is who's the enforcer? Who's the guy who's going to stick a fastball in the ribs, charge the mound? That guy wasn't on this ball club. And it feels like Jackson Merrill kind of is that guy on this ball club. Like he'll come after you if he doesn't like what you're doing out there. Like he's the guy who's going to be, setting the tone for it. It's kind of weird that it takes a dude like that to jump in and be the guy. Like, you're not going to screw with us.
Yeah, again, I think it just speaks to who he is and just kind of the inner, mentality and makeup he has. I will say, Manny Machado, when things are going well, has been that guy. And the thing with Manny Machado as a leader, and look, we've talked about this, it's no secret to anyone who covered him in Baltimore or throughout these years in San Diego. When things are going great, Manny Machado steps up and is a true leader. You see it. I remember in 2020, after the Padres beat the Cardinals, the stadium's empty. He runs out with the 12th fan flag. He's waving it to the fans, watching the game from center field in the apartments. 2022, after they beat the Dodgers, he's the guy in the middle getting drenched. Everyone's, all about Manny. Even 2021, when things were going wrong, that incident in St. Louis, Fernando Tatis was in the wrong. Manny Machado was the one who pulled him aside and said, we don't do that. Manny Machado has it in him to be a great leader. The thing with him is, in the past, like a lot of players on this team, they ride the emotional wave. And so when things would go bad, we'd see Manny get a little bit short, a little bit agitated, a little bit frustrated. And sometimes you need the guy who's a little more even-keeled. And he wasn't always that. I think that just talking to him this year, it seems a little different. I've sensed a little more even-keeledness there. Again, it's a long season. We have to see how it plays out. But I think if you have a more even-keeled Manny Machado who's not going to turn sour when things go south, and you have a guy like Jackson Merrill, you have just a little bit of that new dynamic in the clubhouse this year, maybe things will be a little bit different. Again, we have to see. I'm hesitant to make any sweeping judgments here after 25 games, but the early signs are promising.
We both have kids. How much do you think knowing impending fatherhood, and now fatherhood is kind of helping him be like, yeah, you know what? I got to look at things a little bit differently now in the world.
I hesitate to say that. I think sometimes that's a cliche. There are a lot of times people say that professional athlete, like, oh, he has a kid, he's matured now. And no, he hasn't. I remember that was a thing with Dylan Tate a few years ago. I know that's um, a name the
Sore
Padres.
subject. Yeah.
Donovan Tate, excuse me, not Dylan Tate. Wow, Donovan Tate. I covered him a lot in the minors. Just did not have it talent-wise or mentality-wise. And then I remember he had a kid or two, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's so mature. He's a father now." And he kind of played it up into the papers, and he wasn't. Like he wasn't at all. So, I hesitate to say yes, that's it. But I will just say that so far, so good for whatever the reason.
I was going to start going into the Padres bullpen here, and now as I'm watching this game, it was 9-4, and they've given up 4 runs in the 8th inning, and the Rockies have runners at the corners. It's 9-8, and they're still. Wandy Peralta has not looked good. Yuki Matsui, one of the rare outings, he did not look good. Aniel de los Santos was great, so I think that's a good way to launch into bullpen roles that are defined. And I asked Mike Schilt about this. He says, hey, if somebody is the 8th inning guy and he wrestles that job away and he says, this is it, he would love to have that. They haven't really found those dudes aside from Robert Suarez being the guy in the 9th inning, and he's been absolutely fantastic. And we'll get to him in a second. But they're doing a lot of matchup type things now. Can a bullpen go an entirety of a 162 game season being a quote unquote matchup based bullpen? Or do they have to at some point say, listen, you got to have some certainty here. You're our 8th inning guy. You're our 7th inning guy. And we'll figure out other day games that are more extreme examples, and the starter just doesn't have it that day.
The ideal scenario is having that clear cut. Hey, here's your 7th inning guy. Here's your 8th inning guy. Here's your closer. Boom, boom, boom. Game over. There's no question that's the ideal scenario, but guys have to pitch into it. You don't want to give someone that title and they haven't earned it yet. So I think it's important to let this kind of shake out early in the season. As we've talked about, Wandy Peralta, Yuki Matsui, Aniel de los Santos have all been off to really good starts. Bad days are going to happen, especially in Coors Field, where a 5-run lead can disappear in an instant. That's why
it just did actually. Pass ball and Luis Campusano, it's 9-9.
Yeah, I mean, that's welcome to Colorado. So again, I think it's something where there's no question that as the season goes on, you would love to see someone kind of reach up and grab that 8th inning job and say, I'm the setup man. Like, this is my job. You would love to see someone take that 7th inning role and say, hey, this is mine. And then whenever they need a day off, you can swap in another guy or, because again, no one's going to be available every single day. You want to keep guys rested and fresh and healthy as possible going into the dog days of summer and hopefully into the pennant chase. But we just need to see, again, a lot of these guys, De Los Santos and Peralta, they are veterans. They've been around. Peralta's a little more proven. De Los Santos still has a lot to prove. And Yuki Matsui was a great closer in Japan. Coming over, I wrote about this. I covered him a lot. It's great stuff. He has weapons. He got both right-handers and left-handers. The issue with him is just he's a really small guy who's max effort, and the fastball will sail on him. The control can be an issue. And that was why when I talked to evaluators throughout the process of writing him up in the Baseball America Prospect Handbook, I was expecting to hear, yeah, he could be a mid to high leverage reliever in the major leagues. And I got a lot of, I think it's going to be low to mid leverage because, look, nothing is worse than you bring in a guy in the 8th inning with a 2-run lead and he walks the first 2 guys. And there's a lot of concern that Yuki Matsui might fall victim to that more often than you like. So ultimately, it was more of a conservative evaluation of him as, hey, good stuff. The control might not be as reliable as you want for a true setup man, but who knows? Again, you get with Ruben Diablo and make some adjustments. Maybe over the course of the season, as he adjusts to big league hitters, it improves. So we will see what happens. I will say that all 3 of these guys have the stuff to do it, but you still got to jump up and take the job.
Yeah, well, he's been super efficient for a lot of his outings. He had 5 outs on 7 pitches, 3 outs on 4 pitches, which I was kind of surprised to see that he was able to get that many early swings against big league hitters just getting over here like that.
Well, and I think that goes back to his stuff is really good. I mean, he has the kind of stuff that he can mix and match and put the ball over the plate and challenge hitters and avoid barrels. It's hard to square him up. He's a good pitcher with good stuff. That's just the thing with him is when he's in the zone, he's really, really, really hard to do damage against. It's just he's not always in the zone as consistently as you might like. And that's where the question mark is going to be. Now, he was better last year in Japan than he had been in previous years. So there's some hope that maybe it had improved. Again, we just have to see over the course of the season. But no one has ever doubted if he's in the strike zone, he's going to get swings and misses, and he's going to get ground balls. And it's really hard to square him up or be on time against him because he can come at you with so many different weapons.
Why are there two different versions of Jurickson Profar? There's the version that plays in San Diego, who looks like an all-star, and there's a version that plays everywhere but San Diego, who is, he's a guy, maybe he's at the very end of your bench, or you just kind of have him there for organizational depth.
Some guys play better at home versus on the road. That's been true for as long as the game's been around. Who knows why? I mean, it's hard to ever know for sure. I think with Jurickson Profar, again, it's, he's a high energy, kinetic kind of guy who will do some exciting things for you. I've talked about this in the past, his last run through with the Padres, the numbers maybe didn't jump off the page, but he was an X factor type. He was the guy who'd, have a great relay from left field that would help cut down a runner. It doesn't show up in the box score, but it was really, really important. Or have a great slide at the plate to avoid a tag, and all of a sudden an out becomes a run. Again, doesn't show up in the box score, but a lot of those little things that would make a big difference. And then he would also do things, I think back to this year, he had that, double that was a great, against the Dodgers, puts him up 6-3. And then for reasons completely unknown, he tries to steal third base and gets thrown out.
He'll go brain dead every now and again. Yeah.
And then this past, I think it was the Sunday game against the Blue Jays where he swings at a pitch that literally hits him and then bounces back to draw a walk, which is impressive, and then steals second base and then gets picked off second base to end the inning. Just what are we doing there? 2 outs, like why are you that far off and gets picked off? There's a lot of Jurickson Profar taketh, a lot of Jurickson Profar, giveth. Or I said that backwards. Jurickson Profar giveth, Jurickson Profar taketh. He will do some exciting things. He also does a lot of boneheaded things. I think it's just about, you don't want to restrain him too much because then you lose some of the energy. But I think it's about finding a balance to where it's not so much of a 1-to-1 ratio as it's been at times this year.
And every time he's around, the Padres play better. It's weird. It's like almost like he solidifies the feeling in the clubhouse. It's odd. Remember last year they were scuffling. He comes in, they go 15-5. We're like, okay, well, yeah, they're playing. They don't have anything to lose. Whatever, they're out of it. They all know they're out of it. Although they finished 2 games out of the final wild card spot, as it turns out, and just a couple more things here and there, and they would have been in the postseason. Yeah. But you go, okay, yeah, whatever. That was kind of a fun little thing. And then he gets here, like there's playing better. The clubhouse feels better. It's a better vibe around it. Does he have some sort of secret sauce just from a personality standpoint that just really, really works for the dynamics and the personalities that pervade the Padres clubhouse?
Yeah, look, I mean, he is a 10-year veteran who plays a lot of energy, has a smile on his face, and keeps guys loose. And there's a lot of value in that. A veteran who, can do some good things for you on the field and just has that positivity in the clubhouse. Again, constantly smiling. Again, I go back to that Dodgers series, after, all the stuff with, the bench clearing incident on Saturday night. And, in the aftermath, he's like, hey, I had a brief thought that, it was something, but I realized it, it wasn't intentional. And the entire time he's smiling about it, talked about it as a professional, kept positive about it, didn't get angry, didn't start slinging insults like the other side did. And then even after that, comes back and has that go-ahead double and talked to him the next day. And he was a total pro about it. Big smiles like, hey, you know what? I'm just going out there trying to help my team. I'm not worried about what anyone else is saying. There's a lot to be said for that relentless positivity, that constant professionalism, and the ability to do some good things on the field.
What is it this team needs? I mean, we know we need to keep growing together, keep growing into themselves. Right now, what is this ball club missing that's keeping it kind of on that fringe, hanging out in the wild card spot, versus now we've got a legitimate World Series contender? How close are they?
I see this as more of a 84-ish win team, that maybe if they catch some breaks, 86 win team. They're playing better, and it's good to see. I don't see this as a World Series contender. I think they're still 2 impact bats away, and you want some more starting pitching depth. Again, you look at the bottom of this lineup, and some guys have stepped in and done some nice things early, to be sure, but over the course of 162, I don't know if you want a lot of these guys getting, 3, 4, 500 at bats a piece. And all of a sudden you look up and you've given them a combined 2,000 at bats. You look at their lineup compared to the Braves lineup, the Dodgers lineup. It's just no comparison. Those are World Series lineups. Even the Dodgers, the bottom of their lineup hasn't been performing great. So, then you look at the rotation, I think you would just feel a little bit better with a little more rotation depth, just some more fortifications there on the back end. Again, as much as Adam Mazer and Robbie Snelling are impressive, they're in Double-A and have yet to pitch, a major league game. Expect them to come up and all of a sudden go 10-2 and be, above average major league stars from day one. If it happens, great, but I don't think you can count on that. We still have to see if Michael King can be consistent over a long season. Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish staying healthy, which they weren't able to do last year. Again, I believe in Matt Waldron. I think he's really, really, really fun and a good knuckleballer. I still think he's a better off, number 4, number 5 starter. So I think you'd feel better if there was another starting pitcher or two just to kind of give you a little bit of insurance.
Yeah, the knuckleballer we haven't even gotten to yet. I love the knuckleball. I think baseball is cooler having the knuckleball in it. I did not have on my bingo card the knuckleballer going up to Coors Field and having one of the best starts you're going to find there. What is it about just having one of those guys in the game that just it's like a fascination, like why don't we have more knuckleballers? I mean, I know it's incredibly difficult to throw. It's incredibly difficult to commit to because it's almost like there's this love and yet stigma around the knuckleball. A lot of guys think that if you throw it, it's because you failed as a pitcher for like a real pitcher. So now you have to do that just kind of keep your career going. But it's a legitimate weapon. So how cool is it to have one in the major leagues, and how unique is it the way that Waldron uses it? He uses it just like most other pitchers would use a slider off of his fastball.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I think the game is more fun with those knuckleballer. And I remember talking to Lars Nootbaar about this. I wrote a big feature on Matt Waldron and his knuckleball last fall. And, Lars Nootbaar with the Cardinals talked about they went in with the mindset, we just have to treat it like a splitter. That's kind of the mindset opponents have for it, but it's not a splitter. It dances differently. The way he uses it, we saw even in Colorado, he got 2 of his strikeouts to knuckleball, but a lot of times it's better as a setup pitch where he sets him up to get to 1-2 with it and then finishes them with a nice 92-mile-an-hour fastball. When you've got a 77-mile-an-hour floater in there, then you come back at 92. 92 looks a lot harder than 92. It's about changing speeds, changing eye levels. He does a good job of that. He knows how to use it efficiently. He locates it pretty well for a knuckleball. So again, it's a really, really unique wrinkle. And I go back to something talking to Nootbaar and a couple of the other Cardinals last year for the story I wrote. You don't see knuckleballs on the amateur circuit anymore. You don't see them in the showcase circuit. You don't really see them in the college game because there's this obsession with velo, 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 velo. And that's ultimately what gets guys paid. So that's what they're going to train to do. Pitchability and changing eye levels and, being able to mix in that wrinkle isn't really rewarded financially anymore. So you don't have people doing it. And what it's kind of created is this entire generation, for the most part, any player, who came up after R.A. Dickey retired has never seen a knuckleball in their life. There's a lot of guys now who are 27, 28 who have never seen one in their life, and they're in the major leagues and they see this thing. That's a pretty steep learning curve right off the bat. So I think there's a lot to be said for, hey, it's something different. It's something unique. It's something guys haven't seen before, especially younger lineups. There's no reason why he can't continue to be effective with it as long as he, continues to use it plenty. Again, I've talked about this. His success is directly correlated to his knuckleball usage. Guess what? The Rockies game, the knuckleball was his most thrown pitch. He's going to be more than fine. It's going to take a few years for an entire generation of opponents who have never seen a knuckleball to learn how to try to handle one.
So why aren't there more knuckleballers? I mean, is it just the fact that it's hard pitch to throw? I've tried to throw it. I can't figure it out mentally. There's so few dudes who can do it and do it successfully. Is it simply a matter of it's really hard to pick up the feel for the knuckler?
It's extremely hard. So I mentioned on the amateur circuit, there's no real incentive for people to do it anymore. And when I was covering the minor leagues, I actually would see a decent amount of guys who would kind of just start messing around with it. And a lot of times their story was the same as Matt Waldron's, which is, I was, playing catch in spring training and decided to just mess around with someone. I threw it. I was like, hey, it's actually not bad. And I started to throw it more. But a lot of guys in the minors, They slow their arms down so you can see it coming. And it's a very, very, very difficult pitch to repeat consistently. And it's a very, very difficult pitch to control. And a lot of times what would happen is guys would just start lobbing them in there and they weren't consistent. So there'd be too many just left floating over the heart of the plate, would get crushed. Or you'd look up and they've had, 3 wild pitches and 2 pass balls. So it's just a very, very, very difficult pitch to learn and master. And that's a part of this I want to give Matt Waldron a lot of credit for. People are saying, oh, he did it. Why aren't there more of them? It's not easy. What he did to pick up a new pitch, a knuckleball, as a professional in the middle of his career and master the arm speed and the control in a span of about 2 years, that's pretty rare and honestly just an incredible testament to him and his talent. That takes an enormous amount of talent and ability and just ability to adapt rapidly. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that because it is not easy.
Because there's nobody who can teach it. Like you can go to Driveline and learn velocity. You can go to the PLNU biomechanics lab here and you can learn how to get your sweeper going. Who do you go to figure out how to make the knuckleball work?
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Huff was around as a coach for a little bit. We all know there's some great knuckleballers of years past still roaming around, but again, there's not really a knuckleball guru, at least one that I'm aware of. And again, even Matt Waldron, it was kind of self-taught. He threw it with Chase Walter, another Padres minor leaguer, just in camp. A Padres development staff was like, hey, that looks pretty good. Let's, throw that in front of some of the cameras and with the Rapsodo and see what the analytics say. They were pretty good. And they said, all right, go throw it in spring training a few times. Like he didn't have a knuckleball coach. He didn't have a knuckleball instructor. There was no one in the Padres system who's a knuckleball specialist that taught him how to refine the pitch. He kind of just did it on his own, which again goes back to an insane amount of aptitude and a little bit of mental fortitude too. I remember I wrote about this in the story. He talked about his first game. He went out and threw it. He got bombed, like had no idea where it was going. And it could have been very easy for him to be like, this pitch stinks. I don't want to do this. I'm throwing up 76-mile-an-hour floaters. Like, this is not good for my career. But he stuck with it. He mastered it. And he understood. He had the self-awareness to know, look, I have a fringe average fastball and a fringe average breaking ball. I don't have anything in my arsenal that's going to get me to the big leagues. I need to do something, and I need to master this. And he did.
Does that bring us back to full circle on this conversation that we've had about the Padres and the organization? How hard is it for an organization to say, you know what, dude, go for it. Go commit to it. Throw it as many times as you need to. We're going to give you lots of starts in the minor leagues. You're going to be okay as you try to learn this pitch.
Well, it goes back to kind of the traditional scouting mantra the Padres operate with, which is, hey, different's good. There are a lot of organizations who analytically, even though it showed up okay on the analytics, would have said, yeah, no, this doesn't work. We only want 4-seam up and, curveball down or, sinker slider, our organization has this philosophy and we're not deviating from that, which is ridiculous. Give them credit for being open-minded. And again, some of it comes back to that traditional scouting mindset of, hey, there's a guy who does something really well. Let's let him do it. And who cares if it's not, doesn't fit in this tight box of, well, we only do X or Y. Let's see if he can make it work for him and let's help him be the best player he can be and take a shot on it. And they did. And again, everyone deserves credit all the way up the ladder, coaches, coordinators, instructors, and again, Matt Waldron himself, first and foremost.
The Padres, by the way, down to their final out now, down 10-9. They gave up 6 runs in the 8th inning. Can we just chalk this up to you got Coors fielded? Or is this one of those? I know a lot of people are like, you can't split the series. You have to win 3 out of 4 in Colorado. Yeah, and I'm with you. It's April. Would you like to take 3 out of 4 from an admittedly very bad baseball team in Colorado? Yes. They've never played well there. Teams that play at sea level never play well in Colorado. I mean, I'm happy with 2 out of 4 with 4 dudes who've never thrown there before. What say you?
Yeah, I think whenever you go to Colorado, you have 4 days there. Again, people underestimate the altitude really does a number on you. It really does a number on your fatigue. It really does a number on your ability to rest and recover. If you can split a 4-game series in Colorado, I don't care who you are. If you're this year's Dodgers, if you're last year's Braves, that's a win. You take advantage of the Rockies on the road. That's when they're a really bad team. That's when they have one of the worst offenses in baseball. At home, they score plenty, and it's tough to keep them or anyone down. So, yeah, splitting in Coors Field, take it. Again, is it fun when you blow a lead and allow 6 runs late? No. And you feel like you should win that game? Absolutely. That's a justified feeling. But taking kind of the big picture look at it, again, you split in Coors, you you say, okay, we're fine with it, move on. And then when they come to Petco, that's when you have to really take advantage.
Yeah, and then coming home, you got the Phillies and the Reds, two teams that both figured to be in the playoff hunt, and you got to win at Petco Park, and they've done okay with that this year. That they have not been the last couple of years, actually, not been a home field juggernaut at Petco Park, which is I think is kind of weird because it's such a wonderful ballpark to play in. And by the way, there's your final out. 10-9 Rockies is your final. What is there something weird going on with Petco Park in this club? Is it almost like they get home and they're in San Diego and it's a little ennui that sets in, or is it just happenstance and coincidence?
I think it's more a function of last year's team was just not a great team. Again, I don't think it was anything Petco Park wise. I think it was just, again, the last few years, the teams were flawed. They lacked pitching depth. They lacked some, any number of things. And there's a reason why this team hasn't won 90 games throughout the AJ Preller era. Again, I've talked about they do a great job, him and his staff, with amateur talent scouting and evaluation. Major league roster construction is an entirely different skill set. It is one that they have struggled with at times. Again, there have been individual moves that have been really good, but putting together in a full functioning team over the course of 162, again, they have never won 90 games under this administration. So there are some things there. I think it's more a function of that than anything Petco Park specific.
Kyle, you're awesome, man. You got darn near an hour going here. I appreciate it. What are you working on? Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah. So I'm continuing to write for MLB.com a little bit, and just sort of, doing a couple different things here and there. But I'll be down at Petco plenty, working for MLB.com and a couple other, just working on some other features. And you can still find me on Twitter at Kyle A. Glaser. Still find me on all the radio shows and here with you guys. So I'm still around plenty.
Perfect, man. Kyle Glaser, everybody. Thank you for doing that. You had him at about 84, 86 teams. So if things go well, I had him at 87. So I think we're kind of right in the ballpark there. I'm happy with being close to what you think it is. It means I'm not a complete moron.
Yeah, and look, again, maybe they get a few breaks. If they make some trade deadline reinforcements, that can change. But I came into this before the Dylan Cease acquisition and the Jerks and Profar signing. I honestly saw a 78 win team because you were looking at Jose Azocar and Cal Mitchell playing every day for you in the outfield. And I was like, that's not good. But those additions helped. So I think that 83, 84 wins, maybe get to 86 is sort of where they are now. But we'll see what they do at the deadline. AJ Preller is never one to sit on his hands. So we'll see what upgrades they make then.
Yeah, 84 got to the World Series last year. So, hey, crazy stuff happens in Major League Baseball.
Yes, certainly does, especially with the expanded postseason. That's for darn sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, OGs. We'll see you all next week.